Hello. This is my first stream, and I want to start streaming me editing photos I took in Adobe Photoshop. And to start, I have these 5 portraits I took in Morocco in the Atlas Mountains when I was crossing the Atlas Mountains with a motorbike at a very high peak pass. I met this guy. He's a shepherd, and when he saw me coming from the distance, he ran to the street to pass to meet me, and he stopped me and asked for a cigarette. And when I gave him some cigarettes, I asked him if I could take a photo of him, and this is this portrait. So here are the five ones I took. They're all a little bit overexposed. I tend to go for the closer ones, and especially I like best this ones. I think this one, it looks more mysterious, and his look in the eyes is really interesting. So I would like to go for this one, and I'm gonna start by opening it in Camera Raw. So as I said before, it is quite overexposed. But on his face, we still have all the information we need. The only part that's like really has is burned out and has no information is here on on his clothes. So, but we have to deal with this later. So for now, I'm going to go for black and white, and I will pull down the highlights and then adjust the brightness, the exposure, so that the bright side of his face is just about right. So now let's increase the contrast to something that we like. And now the shadowy side of his face is really dark. Also the background and his clothes is very much too bright. Also the head he has. So I usually do all my photos in 4:5 aspect ratio. So I'm gonna go for this now. And I think I'm gonna crop away still this corner, the bright corner here. So something like this, I think it's going to be right. Okay, so now let's start with masking. I'm or I will just pull up the blacks a little bit so that it's just not cut off on the left side here in the histogram. And maybe also go the whites a little bit down, but there's not much we can get here. And now let's pull up the shadows. Okay, so there's something coming here on the shadowy side of his face, but in general we are still much too bright for this one. So I will pull it down now. The bright side of his face is really nice, but the rest is quite dark. We'll still increase the contrast to something that I like. Pull up the blacks a little bit more, and I think that's a good base to start from. So, okay, first thing, I'm gonna work on the shadowy side of his face. Um, I will take just a big brush with some feather and like generally paint over this side of his face, and then subtract with the brush and less feather all the parts that I don't want to be touched by these adjustments, something like this. Especially the bright side should not be touched because it's already quite bright. But this seems to be just right. Okay, let's see what this does. Yeah, so it shouldn't be too much so that it doesn't look too unnatural, and pulling up the exposure will make it quite flat because it doesn't have real hard light. It's a very soft light, so we can pull it up and then adjust with contrast. Maybe even some clarity, but not too much. And highlights a little bit, but yeah, it shouldn't be too much. I think actually that this reflex, this light reflex on the furthest right side is actually too much. So I'm gonna subtract it from this mask with quite some feather and probably do something like, yeah, just remove it here a little bit. Yeah, let's see what it does now. Yeah, maybe add a little bit again. Something like here. And again, subtract on the bright spots here. So I think that's fine for now. I think it's still a little bit too bright. I will raise the contrast instead of just turning it darker. And I think that's already quite something here. Okay, I think the next step could be the whole left side, the background, and his cloth is too bright. So I would start with a linear gradient coming in like this and removing with the brush his face. A little bit smaller, something like so. And also removing the scarf because I would like to deal with the scarf, I think, in a separate layer. And also especially here on the dark side because it's already quite dark. Increase the feather to have a smooth transition here. Yeah, I think that's okay. And let's see, it's just turn it down. Yeah, very good. Something like that. Okay. Okay, next thing. Okay, let's start with this wool. I think it's a coat or it's just a piece of cloth, which definitely is too bright and it it doesn't have any information, so there is no structure. But this we have to deal later in Photoshop and just copy some of these structures here into the brightest spots. But for now, it would be fine if we just pull it down a little bit with a linear gradient with a very steep edge, just like this, and subtract the darker parts like so. Yeah, something like this. Maybe do it again. Add. Here's a little bit too much. Yeah, and subtract again. A little bit less feather for this one. Yeah, that's better. Especially the dark parts here. Okay, so let's pull it down at first with just the highlights, but it doesn't do much because it's already too bright. And pulling down the exposure too much just makes the blown out areas just gray. So we cannot do much. We can go a little bit darker, pull the whites down a little bit, but there's really not so much we can do. It's really something to later do in Photoshop. Yeah, doesn't make sense to make the burned out area just gray. Okay, next thing, I think the upper right corner is too bright. So maybe I'm gonna start with a radial gradient, something like this, and then subtract his head, maybe with object selection. Let's see if you can do it. Yes, quite good. There's some here. And also remove the scarf. Good. And now to clean it up with the brush, just like so. Okay, pulling down the highlights doesn't do much, but exposure, yeah, some of this. There's this one bright spot. I think it's still too bright. I think we have to do a separate layer on this. So create a new, I'd say just a brush. Let's go in there. Just like this. And brush. Something like this, yeah. Okay. This one. And just pull it down a little bit, yeah. Okay. Good. Next thing, the sky in the upper left corner, it just pulls too much attention. So again, just with a little brush here and pull it down. Yeah, very good. So, okay, I'd say the scarf between the parts where the sunlight hits and the shadowy parts is just too much contrast. So I'm going to try to select it as an object. A little bit of smaller brush for this. Let's see what the AI can do. Almost a little bit. Oh no, it's quite good actually. But I think it still needs this part, even though it's maybe not part of the scarf. Yeah, maybe something like this. I think maybe we can even take this corner here. Okay, it's quite nice. Okay, so what we can do is let's pull up the shadows. It doesn't do much, but it helps on the right side. Pull down highlights. Doesn't, oh, yeah, I think we just have to adjust with the brightness a little bit. Still go with the highlights and then maybe raise the contrast a little bit. Yeah. Let's see what this does. Yeah, it helps a little bit. Even the left side is still a little bit too bright, I would say, but I cannot make this part any darker, so maybe we just paint a brush just for the sunny parts. Something like this. Now subtract with less feather, like here. And the face, of course. And here with a lot of feather, the transition to the dark side. Okay, let's see. Again, highlights first, but it doesn't do much. So just a little bit down until the highlights are fine, but it pulls the shadows too much down. So lifting the shadows in compensation. Okay, so I would say one more mask for his coat to make the edge here, the corner a little bit darker, and maybe one just making his beanie a little bit darker, his head. Okay, so would start with just a brush and again subtract. Let's try objects. Let's remove this object here. Then remove this object here. Yeah, this sometimes it really works well. I think this one is a job for the subtraction brush with less feather and a smaller one. Something like this. Very good. And as we are pulling it down and there are quite some shadowy parts that are already quite dark, we can remove those two with a lot of feather. Something like this. Let's see what it does. Yeah, just a little bit. Very good. Let's see before and after. Yeah. So, and I think the last thing for us to do in Camera Raw would be a mask for his beanie. So I'd say I start with a linear gradient, something like this for his beanie, and then subtract with, let's try, background. Yes, nice. And also the shadowy side, but we're gonna do it with a brush. Brush with quite some feather and decent size, just to have a smooth, it's even too much feather. Just a smooth transition between the sunny part and the shadowy part. And also let's move it here a little bit. And let's see what it does. Yeah, just a little bit down here. It could be more. And I think it should reach more, even more down. So let's discard this and do a new one. So again, linear gradient and all the way down here to his face. Then again, subtract background. Nice. Subtract brush and paint away all the shadowy parts that don't need to be pulled down. Make sure that his face isn't touched, and maybe, yeah, just a little bit less here where there are some quite some shadowy parts. Let's try this. I remove them here and add them again with a brush with a small size. Let's see, maybe something like this. Ooh, yeah, we need to clean this up. So subtract brush with a little feather and just clean this up here. A little more feather for the transition to the dark side. Yeah, not sure. Let's try it. I think it's not natural that the lower part is at 100% opacity and not as an transition. So let's do it again. Create new mask, linear gradient, pulling it down, let's say until here. No, even more, I guess, something like this. And again, subtract background and subtract the brush. The size, ooh, that's too big. And something like this. A little less feather, just to have a nice transition here. Yeah, I think I will leave those shadowy parts as they are because they're already quite black, and I will just mess it up if I try to paint inside this area. Um, yeah. Okay, let's pull it down. Something like this. Yeah, that's very nice. Okay. Yeah, that helps. Maybe even more on the top. So let's do a second one. A linear gradient, only reaching down here. Again, subtract background, subtract brush, and paint out the shadow parts. Very good. And just a little bit more. Very nice. Okay, so let's check for let's check for sharpness. That's quite good. That's okay. So on the details, let's go up a little bit. But there's nothing, yeah, it's really super sharp, it's nice, and everything else, like removing those hairs and those little spots here, I'm gonna do in Photoshop as well. So okay, we have Adobe RGB 16-bit and the cropped full resolution, and we open it in Photoshop. Okay, so here are we in Photoshop. Very nice. So I think I would start by doing a little bit of a frequency separation. So I will copy that whole picture, start a new group, copy it twice, take the lower one, and apply a noise dust and scratch filter. And if we, so what we want to do is we separate the image in one part that's only the tones, and the other part that's only the structure. So what we want to do, if we have like this part on the nose and we want to make it a little bit softer, we want to find a dust and scratch filter that just like removes all the structure and just leave tones, probably something like this. It's depending on your resolution, which radius you want to pick. But for this one, 40 megapixel and this size of his face, it's probably 10 is fine. Applying. And then the second one, we apply image, layer our blurred layer. Blending mode is subtract, and these numbers scale and offset. I don't really know why, but they are supposed to be 2 and 128. Maybe someone can tell me why are these numbers. I just learned it from someone else, so I don't really know. Okay. And now we see on this layer, we just have the structure. So it's actually the difference between the blurred image and the normal image. So this is just the structure. And if we put it on linear light mode, those two layers together make up the normal image. So what we can do now is we can go on the lower layer where we have these blemishes and these spots, and circle them with a lasso. Let's have a feather of 16 pixels. Let's see what this does. Let's say I want to reduce the effect of this scar here. Just checking the feather. Yeah, maybe a little bit more. Let's try 20. So 20. Yeah, that's okay. And we're gonna, we have to be on our blurred layer. And we're gonna blur it with a Gaussian blur, just so that it loses a little bit of the contrast. So in this case, it's maybe around 9, okay? And what this does is, it just makes the blemish a little bit softer. It doesn't remove it, because removing it would destroy the structure of the skin, and we don't want that, because we want to have a natural structure of the skin. But we can soften some parts so that it doesn't like pop up into it doesn't pop up that much and doesn't distract from the image we want to show. So I'll repeat the whole process now for other parts. Also maybe like this one. I don't want to remove it, but I want to have it a little bit softer. So yes. Also, if there are any spots where it's a little bit too bright, or too dark, we can just soften it up a little bit. This is actually a technique usually used in beauty retouching, but I mean, everyone wants to be beautiful. Okay, but what we can also do on this layer, on the structure layer, we can remove spots without removing the underlying tone. So like, let's say we have this white spots here, and we just remove the structure behind it. It's a bit slow, my computer, for the magic healing spot, so it takes some time to do this. What I also like to do is I zoom out quite a bit just to see where there are spots that pop into vision. Like I see there's a hair here and here's some spots. I see some dirt on his jacket. Just I'm just removing this because it distracts a little bit from his face, his eyes, and so just to calm the whole image a little bit down. So let's see what we have. Yeah, we just remove this. Yes. So maybe some of the darker spots on his skin without losing too much detail. Yeah, and here's the dirt on his jacket. These are a little bigger spots. We have to work them in both layers. Let's see. Yeah, these are on the blurred layer. So we can remove them here. Or just blur them with slash feather. Yeah, just like this. Also some spots where they're just like unusually dark spots or unusually bright spots, just to even out the structure a little bit, makes it more pleasant looking. Okay, and back to our structure layer and remove these white spots here. Just like that. So, and also why we are using this frequency separation. Um, in this blown out parts where it's just overexposed and there is no information, we see that on our structure layer there is no structure here. So what we can do, because we separated structure from tones, we can leave the tone as it is, but copy some of the structure into that blown out part. So I'm on the structure layer. I just go to the normal clone stamp, choose some softness, quite a big brush, and I just start copying the structure from here into that blown out area. It's not going to look perfect, but it's better, especially if you want to print, to have some structure in there. Because at the edge between structure and no structure, the printer will have troubles making a smooth transition, and you will just see it. And so we're just copying here some of the structure into those blown out areas. It's not super easy here, but I mean, I think it really makes a difference if we see, yeah. I'm going a little bit closer maybe for you to see it a bit better. So here is our new structure, and this is before and after, before and after. And also here, it's before and after. Just a little bit of the structure added. Okay, so, okay, what is left to do? I'm not sure about this bright spot here. Maybe I will calm this also a little bit here. So I'm back on my tones layer, and I will just copy again some of the neighboring area onto here, just to make it more seamless. Very good. Okay, I think what we can do is brighten up his eyes a little bit. Um, we can do this just a little bit so that it doesn't look fake or something. But we really have to be careful not to overdo this because it often looks fake if it's too bright. So I will just paint this here a little bit more. Sorry, wrong one. So where's the ray? So there's this one, yeah. A little bit more and bigger. Just his eye. Okay. Even more here. Nice. Okay, so a new adjustment layer levels, and I'd say just pull up the highlights a little bit and the mid-tones just a little bit. Let's see what's the difference. Yeah, it's really, I can do a little bit more, I guess. Let's see. And again, let's check from a little bit further away the general impression so that it's not too much. Yeah, I think that's okay. It's just a little bit. Okay, let's see. I think we're quite there almost. Maybe I want to lose here in the right lower corner these brighter spots, just also a little bit distracting. And maybe I also want to calm down this part of his face a little bit more, also like these brighter spots here on the dark side of his face. But I think our our frequency separation, it is too fine to do this because even the blurred out part of it still has these parts almost as structure. So I'd say we merge these layers, copy it, and go back in history just to preserve it, make a new group, and do this whole process again. Filter, noise, dust, and scratches, but this time we're gonna do a much more of a much bigger blur radius, so that there's really no structure left. Something like this. Yeah, let's say this is fine. Even more, a little bit. Yeah, okay. Now the blurred layer is blurred much more, and the corresponding structure layer will have much more information right now. So we'll choose our layer 3, subtract 228. Okay, and again, linear light. So, and again, those two layers together make up the normal image. But to soften up the structures in his face and down here, we can now again take the lasso. This time we can make a bigger feather and just circle this and find, of course, have to be on the blurred layer and find a blur, Gaussian blur that makes this almost go away. Yeah, this is much softer. Let's see with the other. Yeah. And looking at his face, yeah, I think it's about this part here. Let's check the feather. Oh, should be more, even 30 maybe. Let's check. Yeah, could be 40, I would say. Yeah, much better. And now blur. Actually, in the best case, you would for each selection, you would find a separate value of the Gaussian blur because each blemish would need a separate treatment, but often you can just use for the same size, the same Gaussian blur. Okay, let's try this and deselect and let's see what's the difference. Yeah, it's just making this a little bit softer. Okay, very nice. And let's do this also with these spots that are just a little bit too bright. And just repeat this one. Yeah, just softening it a little bit, something like this. Yeah, and maybe some of these here as well. Computer slow. Okay. I think that's it. Okay. Let's have a final check. Is there anything? Yeah, okay. Let's remove some let's remove some of the hair and some little pieces that are just a little bit of a distraction. So now I'm going to merge all of them together, copy, go back in history before the merge and paste it. So, and then I go to the magic healing spot and I'm just gonna do those little pieces here, maybe on his nose, something like this. I'm not trying to disturb the structure of his face too much, but it's always that the impression in a smaller size doesn't have like really strong white singular pixels that result of the contrast of these little spots. Ah, and this hair maybe. Let's lose it. Okay. Ah, I think that's good. Okay, so saving and thank you for watching or maybe not watching. Bye.